And now for our collection of news stories from around the Great Lakes region. It's The Catch.
In Ann Arbor, Michigan, a study by researchers at the University of Michigan predicts more intense allergy seasons due to climate change. Professor Allison Steiner leads the team.
We looked at where, when, and how much pollen would change in the future based on its response to warmer climates. And we found that by the end of the century, or around 2100, pollen emissions could increase up by about 16 to 40% for the United States when we look at just changes in temperature and precipitation. But the increases could be much larger if we also account for how higher CO2 concentrations may influence pollen production.
Higher global temperatures and carbon dioxide levels could also mean that allergy seasons start earlier and end later. Steiner and her team developed a predictive model that forecasts the amount and timing of pollen production for the last 2 decades of the 21st century.
For example, in the spring, like right now, we're going to start to see the tree pollen come out first from deciduous trees, and we can also see pollen come out a little bit later from pine trees in the Great Lakes region. In the summer, that's a time period when grasses start to emit pollen, and then other types of weeds like ragweed will come out in the late summer and early fall. So we looked at how climate was influencing the timing of all of these different types of pollen. And we found that for trees, we could see a shift in the pollen season by about 10 to 40 days by the end of the century, depending upon the type of plant. And we saw that the grasses and the ragweed would shift a little bit later in the season. Because they come out later, they're going to be shifting a little bit later as well.
While this is bad news for those already suffering from seasonal allergies, the model could mean better pollen forecasting across the United States.
We don't have very much data about pollen. There are a handful of centers across the Midwest that are counting pollen on a daily basis. These tend to be located at allergy centers. And we're hoping that the model can fill in some of those gaps in terms of space and time to provide better forecasts for people to manage symptoms.
In Ohio's 9th Congressional District, which includes the Lake Erie shoreline from Toledo to Cleveland, U.S. Representative Marcy Kaptur has introduced the Great Lakes Authority Act, which would establish a federal Great Lakes Authority. Toledo Blade environmental reporter Tom Henry has written about the proposal.
The authority is proposed to help coordinate efforts at restoring the Great Lakes and promoting Great Lakes educational opportunities, and businesses.
Kaptur developed the proposal with U.S. Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan and 7 other House Democrats. It would be a one-stop shop for promoting the region through a variety of approaches.
This is a pretty new concept of dovetailing everything together into one big authority. Most programs, such as the U.S. EPA's Great Lakes National Program Office, are focused in one area, in that case on the environment. This is trying to unify the region's efforts on business, education, environmental restoration, and other aspects.
The proposal calls for $30 million in funding for the first year and $50 million each year after. The majority of that funding would come from the infrastructure bills recently passed by Congress.
There is a lot of bipartisan support for Great Lakes programs. A program called the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which the U.S. EPA is mostly takes the lead on, with the Department of Interior and others. I mean, that's one of the few things in Congress both Democrats and Republicans have consistently supported. So it'll be interesting to see how much bipartisan support this gets.
In Traverse City, Michigan, Anishinaabe journalist Sierra Clark has been reporting about tribal fishermen throughout the Great Lakes region.
The story I've been covering came out of talking to a few tribal fishermen in past stories that I had done, and it covers harassment regarding tribal fishing. This is not something new in the state of Michigan or neighboring states such as Wisconsin and Minnesota, even after the reaffirmation from tribal fishing rights.
The reaffirmation came from a federal court which ruled in 1979 that treaties uphold the tribe's fishing rights that cannot be limited by the states. In the 1980s, harassment of tribal fishers spiked, mainly centered on the use of gill nets. Gill nets are prohibited by state laws that govern non-native anglers, which makes some resentful. While incidents are less common now, in recent years there have been signs of rising violence toward Native American anglers. That's according to the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission.
I'm covering this story right now because there is a lot of misconception on what treaty fishing rights are, but there are also a lot of upticks in the springtime regarding tribal fishing harassment. So I really wanted to bring a piece to the public. So one, it can help educate, and two, just as a reminder that these are sovereign nation rights. These are not special privileges. This story fits in with the larger issue of there really being a cultural misunderstanding or a lack of education that tribal nations in what is now the state of Michigan are their own governance. They have their own laws, they have their own management plans, and we really see this a lot, especially with issues regarding natural resources.
At Great Lakes Now, we aim to cover the Great Lakes region and the people who live here, like you. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our newsletter at greatlakesnow.org.